My name is Avery Collins. I'm 41 years old. I was adopted when I was 3 months old. And according to my brother Grant, that fact never stopped mattering, especially when money was involved. Last Thanksgiving, Grant stood up in Grandma Eleanor's dining room, raised his glass, and said, "Here's to the real heirs of this family." Everyone laughed. Everyone knew exactly who he meant. I smiled, kept eating, said nothing. Then Grandma stood up, walked into the pantry, and returned, carrying an old wooden recipe box. She handed it to me. Grant laughed even harder. He thought Grandma was giving me cookie recipes. What he didn't know was that inside that box sat 50 years of secrets. And by dessert, everything he thought he owned would belong to someone else. Thanksgiving at Grandma Eleanor's house was always crowded. Too many people, too much food, too many opinions. I was seated at the far end of the table, near the kitchen. Interesting placement. Not with the main family cluster, not with Grandma, not with my parents. Near the doorway, like always. That was my first warning. Halfway through dinner, Grant stood, wine glass raised, confident smile, future CEO smile. The smile he practiced whenever investors were around. Then he said, "Here's to the future of the Collins legacy." Laughter. Immediate laughter. My stomach tightened. Because nobody needed clarification. Everyone knew who Grant thought would inherit the company. And everyone knew it wasn't me. Grant wasn't finished. He pointed toward me, smiling. "Some people are technically family." More laughter. Not loud. Worse. Polite laughter. The kind people use when they know something is wrong but don't want conflict. I kept eating. Turkey suddenly tasted like cardboard. I looked at Mom, Judith, waiting, hoping, anything, a correction, a scolding, basic decency. Instead, she laughed softly, not cruelly, almost nervously, which somehow hurt more, because she knew it was wrong, and did it anyway. Dad cleared his throat, then said, "Let's not ruin Thanksgiving." Interesting, because Grant had created the problem, yet somehow I was being assigned responsibility for the mood. Classic family math. I nodded, stayed quiet. I've had 41 years of practice. Then I looked at Grandma, Eleanor, 81 years old. Sharp eyes, sharp mind. She wasn't laughing, not even pretending. She simply watched. One person, one face, one expression. And suddenly Grant's confidence looked less impressive. Because Grandma noticed everything. The Collins family owned a successful regional food company. Sauces, pie fillings, dessert mixes. The kind of products people bought without thinking. Everyone said Grandpa built it. Everyone said Dad expanded it. Everyone said Grant would inherit it. Interesting story. Very popular story. Not entirely true. Grant loved introducing himself as the future of the company. Future CEO. Future owner. Future legacy. Funny thing about confidence. Sometimes it's earned. Sometimes it's borrowed. And sometimes it's built on information you don't have. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, comment, "I remember." Without warning, Grandma pushed back her chair. No speech, no explanation, just stood. Then walked toward the pantry. Everyone watched. Grant laughed. "Looks like Avery's inheritance is finally arriving." The table laughed again. Grandma didn't. A minute later, she returned, holding an old wooden recipe box, scratched corners, faded finish, ordinary, completely ordinary. She placed it in front of me, then said, "Open it when you're ready." And for the first time all evening, Grant stopped smiling. The room moved on. Conversations resumed. Plates clattered. But I couldn't stop looking at the box. Finally, I opened it. The first card said, "Apple pie. Normal. Expected." Then I flipped it over. and froze. Because the back wasn't a recipe. It was a bank deposit record. I looked closer. Date, amount, account number, then a signature. Interesting, because I recognized it immediately. My father's handwriting. Not recent. Old. Very old. This wasn't a recipe box anymore. Grandma caught my eye. Tiny smile. Not happy. Not sad. Knowing. Just knowing. Then she quietly said, "Keep going." Because Grandma wasn't surprised. She expected my reaction, which meant she knew exactly what sat inside that box. I pulled out another recipe. Cherry filling. At least that's what the front said. The back? Client notes, orders, delivery schedules, payment records, handwritten, detailed, professional. I frowned. Because Grandpa supposedly built the company. Yet every document was written by Grandma. Grant leaned over. "What is it?" I shrugged. "Recipes." The table laughed. Because for the first time, I knew something they didn't, and I wasn't in a hurry to share. Near the bottom sat a folded document, yellow with age. I carefully unfolded it. Business registration, original company filing. And there it was. The founder's name. Not Grandpa, not Dad. Grandma Eleanor Brooks. My pulse jumped. Growing up, everyone told the same story. Grandpa started the company in his garage. Grandpa worked day and night. Grandpa built everything. Interesting, because according to this filing, Grandpa wasn't even listed. Not once. The family legend had a hole in it. Another folded paper. Bank withdrawal. Grandma's savings account. Amount. Enough to start a business. Because family myths usually hide money, and money tells the truth. Always. If you've ever discovered that the family story wasn't the real story, comment, "Show me the receipts." Mom noticed the documents. I saw it immediately. Her smile disappeared. Then she asked, "What exactly are you reading?" Not curiosity, concern, real concern. The kind people get when old secrets become visible. I wasn't the only one paying attention. As dessert was served, Grandma leaned close. Close enough that only I could hear. Then she whispered, "Your grandfather never cooked a single recipe. And he wasn't the founder either." I stared at her. She nodded once. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about the Collins family business changed. I stared at Grandma. "Grandpa never created the recipes?" She shook her head. "No." Simple answer. Massive impact. Then she pointed at the box. "Keep reading." The biggest secret wasn't the company. It was the person behind it. At the very bottom sat a small black notebook. Worn edges. Faded cover. I opened it carefully. Page 1, January 1972. Then recipe tests, customer notes, profit calculations, business plans, every page written by Grandma. Every page. Not Grandpa. One entry caught my attention. Grandma had listed her very first wholesale client, restaurant owner, local diner, order quantity, payment received. Interesting, because this happened 18 months before Grandpa supposedly started the company. The timeline was broken. My Uncle Raymond suddenly leaned over. Oldest sibling, family historian. "What are you reading?" I handed him the notebook. His eyes widened, because Raymond rarely looked surprised. Then he whispered, "I remember this." The room got quieter. Dad stood up immediately. Too fast. Bad sign. "Maybe we should do this another time." Nobody had asked to stop. Nobody except him. Which meant Dad already knew where this was heading, and he didn't like it. Grandma looked directly at him. "Sit down, Richard." Silence. Instant silence. Nobody argued with Grandma. Nobody. Dad slowly sat, and for the first time all night, he looked nervous. Actually nervous. Another document appeared. Commercial kitchen lease, original location, founder signature, Eleanor Brooks. Again. Because Grandpa's name still wasn't anywhere. Not once. Not on the lease. Not on the recipes. Not on the client list. Nowhere. Grant reached for the papers. I pulled them back. His smile vanished. Good. Then he asked, "What exactly are you trying to prove?" Interesting question. Because I wasn't trying to prove anything. The documents were doing that themselves. And Grant knew it. If someone built their reputation on a story that wasn't true, comment, "Truth comes out." Then I found something folded behind an old peach cobbler recipe. Trademark registration. Original brand name. Owner. Eleanor Brooks. My heart skipped. Because trademarks matter. Legally, financially, historically. Grandma wasn't just the founder. She was the brand. Behind the trademark sat another document. Partnership agreement. Tiny print. Legal language. Then one sentence jumped out. A royalty provision. Grandma was supposed to receive a percentage of sales. Forever. I looked up slowly. Then at Dad. Then Grant. Because judging by their faces, those payments stopped a long time ago. Grandma watched me carefully. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "I found the missing royalties 6 months ago." Silence. Dad froze. Grant looked away. Grandma folded her hands. "The recipe box wasn't something I stumbled across." Pause. "It's evidence I've been collecting for years." I realized Thanksgiving wasn't happening to us. Grandma had planned this night. I looked at Dad. Really looked at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Interesting. Because innocent people get angry. Guilty people avoid eye contact. I tapped the royalty clause. "How long?" Silence. Then Grandma answered. 18 years. The room froze. 18 years. I did the math instantly. Millions in sales, multiple locations, national distribution. Because that wasn't a forgotten payment. That was a system. A very profitable system. Thanksgiving wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about accountability. Mom forced a laugh. "There must be some explanation." Classic. Family translation for, "Please stop reading." I smiled politely, then kept reading. Because explanations are easy, documents are harder. And Grandma looked oddly calm, like she'd been waiting years for this moment. Then something caught my eye. Grant's briefcase, half open beside his chair. Inside, a legal envelope. Because who brings legal paperwork to Thanksgiving? Someone with plans. Big plans. I looked at Grandma. She nodded once. Tiny nod. She already knew. About the briefcase, about the documents, about everything. This entire evening felt less accidental. More like a setup. A very careful setup. Grant finally grabbed the envelope. Too late. Uncle Raymond saw it. Then Dad saw it. Then everyone saw it. Succession documents. Corporate paperwork. Interesting timing. Someone intended to discuss inheritance tonight. Just not the way Grandma did. Grandma looked directly at Grant. "Tell them." Silence. Beautiful silence. Then Grant sighed. "We were going to announce leadership transition." There it was. Future CEO. Officially. The toast suddenly made sense. Every bit of it. I laughed softly. "That's why you made the toast." Grant's face changed instantly. Caught. Completely caught. Because now everyone understood. The toast wasn't a joke. It was positioning. Public positioning. His cruelty looked strategic. If someone publicly insulted you because they thought power already belonged to them, subscribe and comment "not so fast." Then Grandma dropped the bomb. "My attorney is expecting a call tonight." Mom went pale. Dad closed his eyes. Grant stopped breathing for a second. Interesting. Because nobody reacts that way unless they already know what's coming. They did. Grandma reached into her sweater pocket. Folded document. Recent. Not old. Not yellowed. current. Then she slid it toward me. I read one line, then read it again. According to the amended trust, Grant wasn't inheriting the company. Grandma looked at me. Keep reading. Grant wasn't smiling anymore. I stared at the trust document, then read it again, and again. Because surely I was misunderstanding. I wasn't. The trust didn't just remove Grant, it removed Dad too. No voting authority, no succession rights, no executive control. Dad's face went pale. Grant stopped breathing for a second. Then I reached the final page. And that's when I saw my name. The amended trust named a controlling trustee. One person, one vote, one final authority. Me. The room went completely silent. Grant stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. What? Not confusion. Outrage. The outrage of someone who already spent something he didn't own. Then he pointed at me. You're seriously giving control to her? There it was. The sentence he'd been waiting all night to say. And Grandma smiled. Grandma looked directly at him, then calmly said, Neither was your grandfather's name on my first loan. Direct hit. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Blood wasn't the conversation anymore. Contribution was. And Grant had no answer for that. Grandma made one phone call. Speakerphone. Simple. Professional. Then her attorney confirmed everything. The trust, the amendments, the signatures, the authority. Valid. Current. Enforceable. Because reality had just entered the room. And reality wasn't on Grant's side. Grant's phone started vibrating. Again. And again. And again. Interesting. He finally answered. Listened. Then his face changed. Badly. An investor wanted confirmation of the succession plan. The plan he had already promised. The plan that no longer existed. The collapse had started. Dad looked at me. Actually pleading. Avery, be reasonable. Reasonable. The favorite word of people losing power. I smiled politely, then asked, Was it reasonable when Grandma stopped receiving royalties? Silence. Beautiful silence. Reasonableness had standards. I stood up, holding the recipe box, then looked around the room, at Grant, at Mom, at Dad, at everyone, and made my first decision as trustee. The investor deal was suspended, immediately, pending review. Grant looked sick. Actually sick. Good. Then I made the second decision. Financial audit. Full review. Royalty accounting. Historical records. Founder compensation. Everything. Interesting, because the people laughing at Thanksgiving suddenly hated transparency, and transparency was exactly what they were getting. If someone underestimated you because of where you came from, subscribe and comment, let the record speak. 6 months later, the audit finished. Grandma's royalties had been ignored for years. The founder story was corrected publicly. The company website changed. Founder, Eleanor Brooks. Not Grandpa. Not Dad. Eleanor. Grant lost the succession vote. 2 investors pulled out. His promotion vanished. His executive contract was suspended pending review. Grant had to earn a position instead of inheriting one. His investor deal collapsed. And the people who once treated him like the future of the company suddenly wanted answers. And for the first time, the truth had a seat at the table. Last week, Grandma and I sat in her kitchen. Same recipe box between us. Same scratched wood. Same worn corners. She smiled and asked, Do you know what your inheritance really was? I looked at the box, then at her, and finally understood. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't money. It wasn't control. It was truth. Because they toasted to the real heirs, believing blood built the family empire. By dessert, Grandma's recipe box proved something very different. Blood never built the legacy. The people who protected it did. And when I walked out of that Thanksgiving carrying the box, I wasn't leaving as the adopted outsider. I was leaving as the person trusted to protect what was always Grandma's.